Ukraine attacks oil facilities in Russia, which is benefiting from higher fuel prices and sanctions relief due to the Iran war. It comes after Moscow launches intense aerial attacks on its neighbor. How is the Iran war affecting Russia and Ukraine? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finnegan. The fourth anniversary of the war in Ukraine had passed when the US and Israel attacked Iran at the end of February. The causes of both conflicts may not be linked, but they are intertwined. A common factor, of course, is the US, waging war on Iran, an ally of Russia, while also involved in Ukraine. Kyiv has offered help to countries under Iranian attack with drone technology and know-how honed back home. Russia has benefited from the US relaxing sanctions, allowing it to sell oil as the world faces a supply crisis due to the turmoil in Iran. US President Donald Trump's efforts to forge a deal between Russia and Ukraine have stalled for now, meaning that attacks continue with ferocity. So where does the balance lie now in the Ukraine war? And what impact are events in the Middle East having on the conflict in Europe? We'll talk to our guests shortly, but first a report from Felix Nayawara.
Oil tankers are once again center stage in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The US, Europe and G7 countries imposed sanctions on Moscow's energy fleet in 2022 after its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. But the effects of the US and Israeli war on Iran are being felt in Europe. To help reduce the impact of rising fuel prices, the US has partially lifted oil sanctions on Russia twice since March. And Kyiv says the move only emboldens Moscow.
Окреме питання – санкції проти Росії.
The separate issue is sanctions against Russia for this war, which must push Russia towards genuine diplomacy. Unfortunately, there is another decision by the US to ease oil sanctions. There will be no real benefit from this for diplomacy.
Кожен долар від нафти
Every dollar from oil only encourages Russia to keep fighting.
Ukraine says there are currently 110 Russia-linked vessels at sea. It says they are carrying an estimated 12 million tons of oil. Kyiv estimates the value to be at $10 billion. And Kyiv says that revenue is directly put towards the war. Last week, Russia launched one of its most intense aerial attacks yet, hitting civilian and other targets across Ukraine.
Turn it over to Kelly.
But White House officials say the sanctions waiver will cushion global markets from energy supply shocks.
We're nearing the end.
The war in Iran has restricted transit through the Strait of Hormuz, a critical route for oil and gas from the Gulf. The Iran war has brought Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to the region. Kyiv has been leveraging its experience in drone warfare to help Gulf nations counter Iranian drone strikes. In late March, Zelensky advanced security deals in Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Qatar. Meanwhile, Ukraine has been attacking Russian oil infrastructure, seeking to limit the windfall it has been getting from higher prices. On the sanctions front, Russian officials say they've adapted.
We
have already learned to act in such a way to minimize the impact of such measures on our interests. We'll continue to do so.
Europe has criticized the US waiver on Russian oil, even as it faces a looming energy crisis itself. The EU has collectively spent an additional $25 billion to import energy since the start of the Iran war. The International Energy Agency warns the crisis will deepen in the coming weeks if restrictions at the Strait of Hormuz are prolonged. This has spurred Europe to accelerate clean energy production and explore alternatives to reduce reliance on Gulf energy imports. Kyiv hopes That energy gap can be filled quickly before its allies in Brussels find themselves turning to Moscow in more challenging times. Felix Nyawara, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guests. Joining us from Moscow is Chris Wiefer. He's the CEO of Macro Advisory, a strategic consultancy focused on Russia and Eurasia. In Berlin is Stephen Erlanger, the chief diplomatic correspondent for Europe at the New York Times. And in Yerevan in Armenia is Michael Bossacu, a global affairs analyst and a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Gentlemen, welcome to you all. Let's start with you, Chris. If Kyiv is right, we're talking about a very significant jump in revenue for Moscow here. How big a boost is that in practical terms for Russia's war effort? Is the Iran war effectively now propping up Russia through higher oil prices?
Well, yeah, Russia is certainly